My name is Annette, and I am 32 years old.
Every family has a favorite. In mine, it was always Jenna. Always. It didn't matter what I did or how hard I worked. Somehow she was always the headline, and I was always the footnote, the practical one, the helper, the person you assign tasks to, while you applaud someone else's spark. When we were kids, Jenna couldn't be bothered to clean her room. But when she glued macaroni on paper and called it art, my parents nearly cried. Meanwhile, I brought home spelling bee ribbons and math awards like clockwork, and the best I got was, "That's nice, honey." Then immediately, "Now let's see what Jenna made today." By the time we were teenagers, I stopped trying to compete. Jenna was the dreamer, the creative, the free spirit. I was the realist, the overachiever, the one who took things too seriously. The rules were always different depending on which sister they were applied to. If Jenna forgot my birthday, it was because her mind was on higher things. If I forgot hers, it was a character flaw. If Jenna didn't follow through on something, it was because she was finding herself. If I didn't, it was because I was irresponsible, so I learned the family rhythm. Jenna got attention. I got asked to carry plates. I got into a good college. Jenna didn't go. I got a job. She started painting in her boyfriend's garage. I got promoted. She got Instagram followers. Every holiday, every family dinner, the same dynamic played out. Jenna was the story. I was the background noise. So when she invited everyone to see her first real studio space, a sunlit shoebox on a half-gentrified block of Brooklyn, I braced myself. I knew what was coming. We arrived on a Sunday afternoon with bags of snacks and bottles of cheap wine. Jenna greeted us barefoot, wearing a linen robe like she was about to start a cult. My parents were immediately enchanted. She gave the tour like it was a museum opening. Chipped floorboards, cracked windows, secondhand furniture. Then she gestured dramatically to a corner and called it her creative womb. My parents ate it up. She talked about how rent was a stretch, but she felt aligned there, and my mom nodded like Jenna had quoted scripture. For 2 hours, my parents talked about Jenna's studio, Jenna's big girl life, how brave she was to live without a safety net, how authentic she was for pursuing her dreams. They praised her like she was doing something rare and holy. I sat there with my drink and smiled. No one asked how I was doing, not once. Then Grandpa spoke. He'd been quiet in the corner with a sparkling water, mostly forgotten, watching the performance with the kind of patience only age gives you. He turned to me and asked casually, "Where are you living now, sweetheart?" It was such a simple question, but the room stopped. I took a sip of my drink, looked around, and answered honestly. Top floor, Central Park view, quiet neighbors, concierge service. It was like tossing a match into a dry field. Jenna nearly dropped her glass. My cousin dropped his cracker. My mom stared at me like she was waiting for a punchline, but I just kept sipping. Because what none of them knew was that for the last 5 years, I'd been building something quietly. Not out of spite, not really, but because I couldn't stand the idea of being invisible forever. I invested when everyone else panic sold. I bought property when my friends were still renting. I kept my mouth shut because no one ever asked. But now they wanted to know. Suddenly, I was the one they were curious about. My dad asked what floor. My aunt asked if she could see pictures. My mom didn't say much, just sat very still, thinking. Jenna kept smiling, but it was different now, tight, like she was holding her face in place. That moment didn't explode into a fight. It cracked something. Hairline, quiet, permanent. The kind of crack you don't see yet, but you feel spreading. And the strangest part was I didn't feel triumphant. I felt calm. For once, I wasn't trying to win. I was just being honest. And it turned out the truth had weight, heavy enough to shift the entire room. The air changed fast after that, not with loud reactions, but with something subtler and more telling. People started glancing at me more often, like I'd suddenly grown a second head, like they'd walked past the same statue their whole lives, and then one day it blinked. Jenna tried to keep the energy going. She opened another bottle, offered crackers, launched into a story about a guy she met at an artist residency in Vermont. But no one listened the same way anymore. My dad asked twice how long I'd lived in the apartment. My aunt leaned in and whispered something to her husband. My mom didn't speak for the rest of the visit. She just watched me like she was trying to solve a puzzle that used to be a coloring book. We didn't stay much longer. I thanked Jenna for the wine, complimented her latest painting, a weird piece involving melted clocks and dismembered dolls, and excuse myself. My mom walked out with me, holding her coat tight. She didn't ask about the apartment, not then. Instead, she said, "You seemed quiet today." I smiled, just listening. That night, I went home and opened a bottle of red I'd been saving for no reason in particular. I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights blink like they had something to say, and I waited. It took less than 24 hours. First, it was Jenna. She texted, "You really waited for your moment, huh?" I stared at it a long time. It wasn't mean enough to be a fight, but it wasn't kind either. It was one of those teenage-era jabs she always used to throw when I got a compliment or a better grade, sharp enough to sting, light enough to deny. I didn't reply. I wasn't mad. I was just done playing that old game. 2 days later, my mom called. She started with small talk, work, weather. I should come by more. Then she slid into it like she'd been rehearsing. She asked if I'd bought the apartment. I said yes. There was a short silence. Then she asked what it cost. I told her. I didn't round down. She didn't react the way I thought she might. No excitement, no curiosity, just a flat, measured acknowledgement, like she was handing out a participation ribbon. "Well," she said, "I suppose you've done well for yourself." Then came the real reason for the call. Her friend Lisa, the one who sold real estate part-time and posted inspirational quotes on Facebook, was thinking of buying a brownstone to flip. Maybe I could talk to her, maybe give her some tips, since I was doing so well now. I agreed out of habit, the old reflex to be helpful before I even asked myself if I wanted to. That agreement cracked a door open, and the whole family rushed toward it. My uncle messaged asking if Tesla stock was going to bounce back. I hadn't spoken to him since my college graduation. My cousin sent a Google Doc with a business plan for a dog-friendly co-working space and wrote, "Thoughts?" like I was a consultant on retainer. My mom texted again, asking how hard it would be to set up an LLC, followed by, "Your father and I were thinking of renting out the garage as an Airbnb. What do you think?" Even Jenna started changing her tone. She didn't mention the apartment again, but she started sending me these philosophical texts that felt like passive-aggressive incense. Money doesn't make people happy, you know. Success looks different for everyone. Once she sent a blurry photo of her studio window with the caption, "Real wealth is sunlight and time." I didn't reply to most of them. What was I supposed to say, that real wealth is also paying your bills and not needing to perform your struggle for applause? At first, I almost enjoyed the attention. It was flattering in a way I didn't want to admit, seeing them suddenly interested, suddenly curious, suddenly treating me like I existed. Then it started to feel wrong, like I hadn't been upgraded to respected. I'd been upgraded to useful. That was the part that sat heavy in my chest. I hadn't asked for this attention. I hadn't flaunted anything. I answered a question. That was it. But the moment they realized I might have something they could use, the deck got reshuffled. One minute, I was the practical, forgettable daughter. The next, I was the family consultant. It wasn't respect, not fully. It was something else. And part of me already knew the shift wasn't over, not even close. The real change was just beginning. I'm not sure when curiosity turned into entitlement. It didn't arrive all at once. It crept in, dressed as interest, masked as admiration, wrapped in familiarity. The questions kept coming, texts and emails and calls framed like they just wanted to learn. How did you get started? What apps do you use? What markets are hot right now? I answered a little at first, carefully, vaguely, thinking maybe if I gave them just enough, it would satisfy the itch. It didn't. It sharpened it. Once they sensed I knew something they didn't, it stopped being about understanding and became about catching up, about shortcuts, about access. Then they started showing up. It began with my parents. They told me they were coming into the city for my dad's cardiologist appointment and suggested lunch. Halfway through, my mom glanced at her phone and said casually, "We've got time. Maybe we could swing by your place." I hesitated, felt that familiar tightening in my chest, then said yes. I told myself it was just a visit. It wasn't. The moment they walked in, my mom's energy shifted. She wasn't admiring the space. She was evaluating it. She ran her hand along the marble counter, tested the water pressure in the guest bathroom, asked if the floors were original. My dad stood silently by the window, looking down, then asked what the unit below mine had sold for. Not how long I'd lived there, not whether I liked it, numbers, comparisons, metrics. Then my mom said it, light and casual, like she was commenting on the weather. We've been thinking about getting a little place in the city. Nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom. Maybe you could help us find something. I said I was busy, but had friends in real estate and could connect them. She smiled like I'd told a joke. You're the expert, she said. You've clearly figured it out. That night, I got a follow-up text. Then another the next day, both with links to listings, both asking if I could take a quick look. 2 days later, Jenna showed up. No warning, no text, just rang my doorbell at 3 in the afternoon on a Thursday. I opened the door, and she stood there in oversized sunglasses, messy bun, holding a lukewarm iced coffee like she was arriving for a photo shoot. She looked me up and down and said, "So, this is it." I stepped aside and let her in. She moved slowly through the apartment, not talking much. She glanced into each room like she was trying to picture herself in it. She stood on the balcony for 10 minutes without speaking, just staring out at the park like it owed her something. Finally, she turned to me and said, "It's not what I imagined." I raised an eyebrow. "It's more grown up," she added, like that was a criticism. She asked if I had a guest room. I said no, and added, gently but clearly, that even if I did, I wasn't offering it. She didn't argue. Before she left, she paused by the door and said, "It's just weird, you living here. I always thought I'd be the one in a place like this." I didn't say anything. There wasn't a response that wouldn't turn into another argument about destiny. A week later, my cousin texted. He was between leases and needed a place to crash for a few weeks. Promised he wouldn't be any trouble. I said no. He sent back a thumbs up and never texted again. Then my mom asked if I could co-sign a loan. "It's just a small thing," she said. "We're trying to help Jenna get a more permanent space for her studio. She's really taking it seriously this time." I stared at the message for a long time. No one had asked how I was doing. No one asked if work was stressful, if I was happy, if I was tired. They didn't want me. They wanted my stability, my access, my credibility. That realization didn't hurt the way I expected. It clarified. They weren't curious about my life. They were shopping it. That's when money entered the conversation without even pretending to knock. The first transfer was small, almost polite, $300 for Jenna. She didn't call it a loan. She said she was just short this month and needed help covering internet and groceries. I sent it without thinking, muscle memory more than generosity. She replied with a sunflower emoji and a thank you that felt oddly light, like it weighed nothing. Then it was my mom, $700 for car repairs. "Your dad didn't want me to ask you," she added, as if that made it better. Then my Uncle Steve called about a business opportunity. He didn't say what kind, just said, "You're smart, Annette. I know you've got a little extra to play with." That's when the spreadsheet started. Not out of anger, just habit. Column A, name. Column B, amount. Column C, date. Column D, whether they said thank you. Most of them didn't. By the end of the month, I'd sent $15,200. And that didn't include the things I didn't log, like covering my cousin's rideshare account for a week because his app was bugging, or buying Jenna a new desk chair because she complained about her back. I told myself I could afford it. That part was true, but it wasn't the point. The point was how quickly my success had been converted into obligation. Then Jenna crossed a line I didn't know was still there. I came home one evening to find a note slipped under my door, torn sketchbook paper, a pressed daisy taped to the top like something meant to be cute. She'd been nearby for a gallery visit and just wanted to feel the energy of my place. I wasn't home. She let herself into the building anyway. She still knew the code from last year. The note started light, a few lines about how proud she was of me, how inspiring it was to see me thriving. Halfway through, it pivoted. She was behind on rent. Her landlord was threatening to reevaluate the lease. $5,000 would stabilize everything and let her create without fear. She didn't ask if it was okay. She didn't mention paying me back. She assumed. The last line was, "What did it?" "You're doing so well now, you won't even feel it." I sat on the floor with that paper in my hand and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger, not sadness, detachment. I put the note in a drawer and didn't respond. That weekend, my mom called again. She didn't ask how I was. She said she'd heard Jenna stopped by and hoped I could help her just this once. I told her I'd already helped many times. She didn't acknowledge that. She said, "Well, it's not like you're struggling." I said, "I've given this family over $15,000 in the past month. There was a pause, just long enough to register. Then she said, "But you can afford it, can't you?" That was the moment everything snapped into focus. I wasn't the daughter anymore. I was the wallet. They didn't ask if I was tired or lonely or stressed or waking up at 2 in the morning, worrying I'd overextended myself renovating a second property. They saw numbers and decided those numbers belonged to them. I stopped answering calls after that. I turned off my phone for an entire weekend and stayed home, drinking tea on my balcony while Central Park glittered under a gray sky. I breathed. I slept. Then, Sunday morning, as I was cleaning up from breakfast, my boss called. He never calls on weekends. He said he'd received a strange LinkedIn message and wanted to give me a heads up. It was from my mother. She'd introduced herself, clarified she was Jenna's mom, not mine, and pitched Jenna as a remarkable creative mind ready to transition into corporate wellness or branding. She said Jenna could consult, give talks, even help with company culture. She also claimed I'd personally said Jenna was ready for the next step. I nearly dropped my coffee. My boss was kind about it. He said he knew it didn't come from me. He just wanted me to be aware. I thanked him, apologized, hung up, and sat there staring at the counter. They weren't just using my money anymore. They were using my name, my credibility, my access. That morning, I wrote a letter. Not to them, to myself. I taped it beside my mirror like armor. A reminder that they don't get to take any more unless I say yes. A few days later, Jenna called again. She'd found a new studio space. Bigger, brighter, sacred. She needed $8,000 fast before someone else signed the lease. She promised it was the last time. She said she'd pay me back by summer. I said no, just that. She hung up. 4 days later, she posted a story on Instagram. A close-up of her face, eyes wet, captioned, "Some people choose comfort over compassion." A few cousins liked it. One reposted it. I didn't respond. 2 days after that, an email arrived from my parents. Subject line, "Exciting family opportunity." It was a 3-page PDF, formatted like a pitch deck. They'd found a farmhouse in the Catskills, a fixer-upper. They wanted to turn it into a family-owned Airbnb retreat. They needed a primary investor. Estimated cost $180,000. Timeline 6 to 9 months. Potential returns incredible. There was no mention of how they'd pay me back, just the assumption that I would fund it. I closed the email and didn't respond. The next day, my mom called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail saying they knew I'd been overwhelmed, that this could change all our lives, that they'd done so much for me over the years, and this was my chance to give back. I called her back the following morning. I told her I loved her, loved Dad, loved Jenna, despite everything, but I wasn't investing in the farmhouse. I wasn't paying anyone's rent. I wasn't co-signing loans or pretending this dynamic was normal. I told her I needed a break from being their financial plan. She went quiet. Then she said softly but clearly, "So you're choosing money over family?" I said, "No, I'm choosing peace." She hung up. The silence that followed wasn't explosive. It didn't come with slammed doors or angry voicemails. It was colder than that, controlled, deliberate. Jenna stopped posting for a few days. My cousins went quiet. The group chat dried up until it felt like a forgotten room no one wanted to enter first. I started to wonder if I'd finally crossed some invisible line that couldn't be uncrossed, if choosing myself had cost me whatever fragile place I still held in the family. Exactly 1 week later, a card arrived in the mail. Plain envelope, no return address. Inside was a single sentence, handwritten in a familiar looping script. "You've changed, but maybe we needed you to." It wasn't signed, but I knew it was my mom. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, holding that card, not sure what I felt. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't victory. It was stillness. And for the first time, stillness felt like enough. The noise didn't come rushing back the way it used to. Instead, there was a cautious re-entry, like everyone was testing the ground before stepping too hard. Jenna was the first. 3 weeks after the studio note, she texted me out of the blue. No emojis, no philosophy, just, "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have put that on you." It didn't sound performative. It sounded tired, honest. I waited until the next morning, then replied, "Thank you, I forgive you." And I meant it, not because everything was fixed, but because I wasn't interested in carrying anger anymore. She asked if we could meet, said she didn't want to talk about money, just wanted to talk. We met at a small cafe tucked into a side street downtown, the kind that used real mugs and played instrumental jazz so quietly it blended into breathing. She was already there when I arrived, staring out the window like she had nothing left to prove. When I sat down, she smiled, not the big practiced one, but something smaller, real. We talked about ordinary things: work, art, a book she'd read, a trip I wanted to take someday. We didn't dissect the past. We didn't need to. Before we left, she looked at me and said, "I'm going to try to do things differently now, on my own." She didn't promise anything. She didn't ask for help. I nodded. That was all I'd ever wanted. We hugged, briefly, carefully, like two people learning a new language. A week later, my parents sent a birthday card. No requests tucked into the message. No guilt disguised as praise. Just, "Happy birthday, Annette. We're proud of you. Love, Mom and Dad." I stared at it longer than I expected to, folded it back into the envelope and set it aside. I didn't need to respond immediately. For once, there was no pressure either way. The group chat never returned to what it was, and that was a good thing. It became background noise instead of a command center, a picture of a new puppy, a meme from a cousin, nothing urgent, nothing extractive. I started sleeping better. I went entire weekends without checking my phone. I rejoined my gym, bought new sheets, signed up for a pottery class I'd bookmarked for years but never joined because I was always too busy being available. One night, sitting on my balcony with a cup of tea, I pulled out the letter I'd taped beside my mirror, the one I wrote to myself. The paper was wrinkled now, the ink slightly faded. I read it once more, then took it down. Not because it wasn't true, but because it had already done its job. They knew now. They knew what I'd built, what I protected, and what I wouldn't give away anymore. The version of Annette who stayed quiet, who kept the peace at her own expense, who mistook being needed for being loved, she was gone. In her place was someone who understood that success wasn't the apartment or the investments or the view. It was the ability to say no without shaking, to choose peace without apology. I didn't lose my family. I changed the terms. And in doing so, I finally gave myself the life I'd been building all along.